What's happening, guys? Christopher Griffith here with Hammer. And we didn't even get the intro music that time, right?
No
Usually,
intro music.
I know that totally caught me off guard. Brandy is producing this thing today, so if it goes a little wonky, she's a veteran, right? So she a little. Anyway, we didn't got the awkward cue, but as always, we're on here this morning. I've had some dentist work, so I can't really speak too good, but that's okay because as always, Hammer's going to walk you through what's happened since last week to now and what you really need to be focused on or paying attention to moving into the next couple of weeks if you're in the situation where you're going to be locking a mortgage loan. Yeah. So with that, Hammer, well, rock and roll, man.
There you
Nice
go. Hey,
hat.
what's going on, everybody? Thank you. So, anyway, I am of good cheer with my wonderful Santa hat. I'm going to bring you all great, fantastic interest rates this week. That's what we're going to bring. Actually, let's talk about what happened last week, real quick. It was a really quiet week last week, and a great example of why sometimes you hear these concerns about rates going up or rates going down, and you get that FOMO, fear of missing out. And a lot of times everyone gets fear of missing out because nobody wants to miss out on great interest rates. The good news is we are experiencing a time of wonderful interest rates. Christopher, what was the rate you paid on your first house? Do you remember your interest rate?
Man, honestly, I think it was 3.25. I bought in 2012. It was a VA loan. It was a
Very
really good
good.
rate.
I was going to say that was a really great rate, but one thing I'll point out to you though is that did you guys notice I have to remember that's a lot of times that's what it's going to be, because after you get done bragging to your friends about what a great interest rate you got, then you pay your bill every month and you don't really pay attention to it. So you don't need to fixate on interest rates, and that's not going to change anytime soon because they're actually staying really, really stable. So Brandy, would you mind? Can you show my screen? I will flip over to the slides if you can show my screen. All right, cool. And then there you go. So now you guys will see my screen here, and a quick recap of what happened last week. Rates remained low where they've been, very low. By the way, answering that question, I'll give you my interest rate was a little bit higher than yours. My first interest rate was 11.5%.
That means you're older than I am.
It does. It means I'm older than you. It also means that as sometimes when some of the consumers on the Zoom today, they may have noticed that sometimes you get surprised and you have something on your credit you didn't even know was there. And I had actually my first credit card was from a true predatory lender, and they had reported me 90 days late 37 times in a row because I closed the account when I found out that my yearly fee was $500 a year. So I didn't realize, though, that the account that I closed was my checking account that they were taking money from and not the actual Visa account. I was trying to, hurt them off at the pass. And I ended up winning a class action lawsuit, and it was all taken off my credit. My credit was repaired because that was the only negative thing that I did have on there, I was blessed to say. But my first loan was not a VA loan. It was a subprime loan. I had 11.5% interest rate. And even that, people would say, why would you do that, Hammer? Because it was actually about $80 a month cheaper with the mortgage and the taxes and insurance and even the homeowner's fee, because it was a condo, and it was actually about $80 a month than what I was paying for that same unit for rent, because I actually bought it from the builder, and I was paying $1,000 in rent, and it was actually about $920 a month with my mortgage payment. So even with a very, very high interest rate compared to today, I was saving money on my monthly cash flow. And the best part of it, as you and I have talked about many, many times, even if you're making a payment, it was the equity that I built in that condo in 2 years that I was able to actually use as a down payment on my next house. And so we've talked about that before, about the owning a home and the equity and the benefits of owning a home, and not to get too caught up in your mortgage. So anyway, quick recap of what happened last week. The average mortgage rates did not move much. Market concerns about the Omicron variant that gave us that little blip where rates did improve a little bit for about a week after Thanksgiving. They've basically subsided altogether. So of course you'll read about Omicron on the headlines, and if you look for news of it, you'll find lots of news for it. But as far as the markets go, it's not really a concern that we're going to see a lot of lockdowns, especially here in the United States. There's not a concern over what effect that's going to have on the stock market and on the bond market. So therefore, it's really not affecting mortgage rates anymore. So a lot of that has already worked its way through the system. Basically, it's all subsided. Investors are now looking to see what is the Fed going to do, and that's going to happen this week. So we're going to talk about that. We did see a little bit of improvement in the middle of, or I'm sorry, things got a little bit higher in the middle of the week, as we saw maybe a little bit in closing costs, even though rates largely remained the same. It might have been a little more expensive to close that loan in the middle of the week if you locked in, but only just slightly. And then by the end of the week, it was almost right where we were the week before. So this is wonderful for all of you out there that are out home shopping, and because you don't have to worry about any large changes in interest rate, anything that's going to really affect your payments, and that's going to affect your purchase power at all. So that's been real quiet. And then as far as this week, rates could get a little more volatile. We're going to have the Fed meeting is going to start tomorrow. It's called the Federal Open Market Committee meeting, the FOMC meeting. What happens is the Fed members get together and they're going to discuss a couple different things over this meeting. It lasts 2 days. It's going to be Tuesday and into Wednesday. And they're going to discuss how they think they need to deal with inflation, because that's a big concern and a big issue. And it's part of what's called their dual mandate of what they need to be involved in controlling. So they're going to discuss
What's the other
inflation.
Inflation.
The other one is unemployment. So unemployment, which that's why when we talked about that, I think it was a week ago, we talked about the unemployment number had dropped quite a bit, and it was down to 4.2%, which is very near the 4.1%, which is what Congress has set as a current level for what they think unemployment should be. So that's the Fed's dual mandate, is to keep inflation at or near 2% and to get unemployment near 4.1%, which they've done. So that's why at this meeting, we're expecting to see that the Fed is going to announce that they're going to increase the speed with which they've been pulling back on buying bonds. So we've talked about on some of these past sessions in the past with COVID, the Fed was fighting to keep the markets liquid and to keep interest rates low, keep the economy moving along when it was a big issue that the economy might really slow down as we were going through lockdowns in 2020, and a lot of people weren't going out and spending in 2020. In 2021, that has not been an issue. Consumer spending is up. The economy is doing very well. It's very healthy. It's actually improved to better numbers than before COVID. So now the Fed is starting to pull back on all of this economic stimulus that they've done, in this monetary stimulus. And this has been in the form of they're buying up bonds, which is U.S. Treasuries, which is the U.S. debt, and they're buying mortgage-backed securities to keep that money liquid. So that's why interest rates have been so low, and specifically why mortgage rates have stayed so low, is the Fed is buying up the market. And as lenders are loaning you money, and then they're securitizing that, which we've talked about and we'll talk about again in a couple of weeks. But as they're putting that out there on the market, the Fed has been helping to make sure there's a strong demand for that, keeping the prices down, or keeping the prices up rather, and keeping rates down. And that's how that's been working. So the Fed, this meeting is likely to announce that they're going to speed up the process with which they slow down buying these mortgage bonds. So they're buying them right now they were doing $40 billion a month, give or take, in mortgage bonds, and about $80 billion in U.S. Treasuries. They're going to go ahead now and they're bringing that down, $10 billion in treasuries, $5 billion in mortgage bonds, and they've increased that now. They're talking about increasing that to basically double. So they would do $20 billion in treasuries and $10 billion in mortgage bonds, reducing it every month. And instead of having this whole thing come to an end sometime around next June, they're looking to have it come to an end now. It's anticipated sometime around March. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show up on the screen for y'all. I want you guys to see some interesting analytics, so you can kind of see which direction things are going and why we say the things that we say. So these are different Fed meetings and the probability that the Fed is going to go ahead and raise rates. So this is the target rate probability per each Fed meeting. So there's a probability that rates will remain the same. That's what this little check pattern means. The rates are currently at 0 to 25%. They use an odd range to basically 0% for the Fed funds rate. And remember, mortgage rates are never going to get to 0%. This is the Fed funds rate. This is the rate that banks lend each other money overnight. And even though it's kind of an odd it doesn't directly, play with everything. It actually does affect everything. So there's a 5% belief the Fed could somehow decide to raise rates this week. Very, very unlikely. I'm surprised to even see that there's a 5% probability. It's that's just some people, I think, out there for the long shot. They're looking for the slow pony to see if it pays off. But then in January, it starts to increase. We've got about a 10% belief that we may see rates that are increased by the Fed as soon as January. That's also very unlikely. But March, you're going to see a big jump. And in March, this is the current belief that we could see interest rates, the Fed funds rate, start to rise as quickly as March. Now, that doesn't mean you'll see interest rates like mortgage rates rise in March. You'll actually see that happen sooner as markets start to price this in, and this belief that they're going to have less of a profit, and that the markets are going to change based on what's going on here, how expensive it is for them to borrow money. So as we see this happen, I want to show you guys, I'm going to show you May and June, and then we're going to show you some comparisons. So in May, it's expected about 60 or about 55% probability that we're going to see at least one rate increase by May of next year. And then by June, that number increases again to just about 80%. So it's believed that we should see our first Fed rate increase by the June meeting of next year, that we could see it by May. Some are even forecasting it could be as soon as March. Now, at this meeting, the Fed is going to get together and they're going to do what's called the dot plot. And the dot plot is when they forecast out what they think rates are going to be all the way out through 2024. And depending on that, they're sending signals to the market on when they think rates should be increased. So we could see some market reaction to that, could see some volatility, but it's nothing for anybody to panic about. We're not going to see interest rates that are currently in the low threes go up to 4%. You may see that your interest rate may go up 1/8 of a point, or it may cost you a little bit more money to get that interest rate that you're being offered now. Maybe your closing costs go up a little bit. But there's also what was a very small outside chance before that things could improve that's actually getting bigger. The odds that we may see just a slight improvement. Now, we're not going to see rates take a huge dive. We're not going to see rates get tremendously better. So if you are looking at closing soon and you're considering locking in your interest rate, now's a great time to do that. Rates have been stable. You really aren't likely to be leaving much on the table, and there's more of a chance that you could see things actually get worse than get better. But you don't have to worry if you don't lock in an interest rate. If you're looking at something that's closing in the new year in January or February or new construction, rates are still forecasting to remain very low. So that's kind of where we're at today. And then the last thing I said I was going to do was give you guys a comparison. I wanted to show you what the belief is on how we're going to see those rates change and how that's changed over time. So this little chart here, this light blue bar is a month ago. The little bit darker is a week ago, a little bit darker yet is a day ago, and then this is the current belief. So if you go back and look in June, that was the big belief, is that we were going to see some kind of a rate increase by June. You could see that there was a very large percentage that believed we were going to see over 60, almost 70% believed we were going to see some kind of a rate increase by June. That number is now about 75%. So not a tremendous movement there. But if you start to look in May, you can see that there was a belief it was only about, maybe that's about 35%, and that's increased quite a bit now to about 55% to believe we're going to see some kind of an increase by May. And also in March, that's starting to gain some momentum. There was only about a 20% belief that we would see a rate increase by March. That's now about 35%. So it's moving up quite a bit. That we believe that investors believe we're going to see some kind of a rate increase. The good news is that even though they're expecting that, we haven't seen mortgage rates really jump up as much as we've expected. Usually we would expect to see mortgage rates start to creep up as this becomes speculated. However, it has not been the case. So, Brandy, you can turn my screen off now if you like. Thank you. All right, Christopher. So I know that your lips are a little numb, but is there anything you wanted to add to any of that?
I'm telling you, I'm still kind of loopy from I did the whole gas mask thing. Just in case you're wondering, yes, I'm a grown man. I did a gas mask thing. Like, whatever, get over it. I don't like needles. I've been poked too many times. And the ones in the ear hurt. Like, so every little bit, right? Anyway, so I'm still a little loopy. Can't really talk really well. Now's a great time to point out that in the whole lock versus float thing, like there's a lot of loan officers out there that discuss this, right? And I think it's just very apropos that I quite literally refer to them as floaters. And so without going too much into that ideology, don't be too much of a floater, knowing what floaters usually are when it comes to your interest rate, because more often than not, it's not going to work out for you. It's still going to go, one way. I think the cost is always relative. Shop to ensure that you're receiving the best that you could be over the people that you've seen. And as soon as you're in the position where you can attain a thing that works out well for you, don't focus on one tiny thing and potentially harm yourself or lose benefit as well, or worry about marginal gain, right? When you get on the gun and you're ready to take your shot with locking your interest rate, don't float and hope, basically, is what I'm telling you, because more likely you're waiting longer into the process is only going to delay certain features of what you need to accomplish in order to get into your house. So just to kind of point that out. So we talked about shopping. We talked about floating. We talked about rates. Like Nathan's not in the background messaging me, being like, well, talk about this too. And I'm telling you, my whole upper lip. Anyways, cavity. Had a cavity. It was an old cavity. They had to re-drill and fill with new cavities. So that kind of stinks.
Yeah.
But
well, modern dentistry, at least we get to keep them. That's they're not wedded to you. So
yeah, they're not yanking them.
Well, I think that's it then. I think we are good for this week. If anyone has any questions, please make sure you go ahead and I'm watching the comments. Someone said you're a redneck.
Oh, thanks, man.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to go ahead and use the ad thing, tag me in there. I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have. Otherwise, it should be a pretty quiet week before Wednesday's craziness. Wednesday, we could see some movement. It's a great day to make sure that if you are working with a, mortgage professional, that you chat with them about what you might want to do with your interest rate. Talk to them before Wednesday, or definitely before Wednesday afternoon, before that Fed meeting. And then it should be quiet towards the end of the week again, even though there's actually 20 different central bank meetings going on this week, meaning our central bank is the Fed. We've got the European Central Bank that'll be meeting. We've got the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan. There's banks all over, all dealing with the same thing that our Fed is, trying to keep the economy in check. And a lot of them dealing with inflation. It's a global problem now. And, they're trying to keep their economies healthy, but not too healthy. So it's quite a balance.
The whole world actually dealing with some of that crazy flavor of stuff. Oh, and you said something too, that interest rates will never get to zero.
Yes. Well, mortgage rate. I said mortgage rates will never get to zero.
Oh, out of curiosity, are there any countries in the world that are dealing with 0% or negative interest rates around their mortgages?
I'd have to look, but I don't think so. Not for mortgages. I don't think anybody is paying you to be in a house. So there are other investments that actually, when you do, like even our own treasuries, when you do, they do real return and forecast return. Like you can actually end up with a negative return where investors will invest in bonds or treasuries to lose less money because of inflation factored in and things like that. But when it comes to a real return, I don't think there's any negative mortgage rates right now. It would be nice if people would pay me to live in my house, though.
I think Denmark does.
Do you think? I'll have to Google that, because I don't.
I think, and I'm not the expert here. It's your category, so I get to be a dumb redneck and guess. But I think,
well, I'm not that far from you. But again, I know ours, everything close to home. But I don't have any investment property in Denmark, so I can't comment on that one too heavily.
I don't know, and I'm not saying it would be a good thing. Certainly, the type of environment and what that would mean to real estate value in general. But I was just curious as a never statements and always statements should matter a lot. And I'm always curious because things change, right? And if that can change, what causes that? And what does that mean about that asset there is valuable? Because like you said earlier, it's not that you recall what the interest rate was or necessarily what it was. It was compared to what you could rent it for. So the cost of that thing, the real cost of it, right? Housing cost, and what you gained over a long period of time. And so in those places where you do have crazy stuff going on with interest rates and mortgage rates, what happens to the asset inherently in those places too? So just things that I think for people to be curious about all of this stuff and study. But certainly thanks for your time, Hammer. Thanks for walking through this stuff as you always do. And we'll look forward to next week, and hopefully Wednesday it doesn't get too crazy.
Sounds good. Thanks, Christopher. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Brandy, for taking care of all the back end.
Great job,
Bye,
Brandy.
everybody.